Welcome to Burr Forman's 2023 Black History Month program. Today we will be studying Black history through the lens of Negro spirituals. Negro spirituals are a form of American folk music created by Africans enslaved in the American South. Prior to the end of the Civil War, spirituals were passed down as oral traditions among the enslaved. After emancipation, ensembles such as the Fisk Jubilee Singers brought spirituals to wider audiences, thus popularizing spirituals and solidifying them as part of the canon of American music. Spirituals are a unique expression of both biblical beliefs and the African experience in America. In Africa, music was central to people's lives and often marked important events such as birth, death, or even daily activities. Slaveholders discouraged African spirituality and banned slaves from gathering to worship according to their ethnic traditions. However, slaveholders did permit Africans to participate in Christian forms of worship, including the singing of hymns. Enslaved persons were often drawn to biblical stories that paralleled their own circumstances. Stories of exile, salvation, and liberation. Stories of Daniel, Moses, and other Old Testament prophets. Infused with the harmonies and lyrics of hymns, the enslaved created spirituals that adopted the biblical narratives and retold them in ways that addressed their current conditions and their hopes for a better tomorrow. Some spirituals were mental, emotional, and spiritual escape. Some were codified protest songs calling for the physical release from slavery. You may hear religious terms or phrases today, but this is not a gospel concert or a worship service. But in recognizing the humanity of people who were enslaved, we must recognize not only their physical contributions to America, but the spiritual perspectives and practices that enabled them to withstand the horrors of their daily existence. For it seems a uniquely human thing to use abject suffering as a fuel for the most achingly beautiful art. Indeed, during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, certain freedom songs were actually adapted from old spirituals, such as "Oh Freedom" or "Eyes on the Prize." Even one of the best known freedom songs, "We Shall Overcome," was born out of merging the gospel hymn, "I'll Overcome Someday," and the spiritual, "I'll Be All Right." Thus, a window into the world of spirituals is a window into the African Americans' ongoing struggle for human expression and self-determination. I trust that you will enjoy both the music and the message of today's program. From this point forward, you will hear the voices of Pine Forge Academy Choir and their director, Jarrett Roseborough. Pine Forge is a predominantly African-American boarding school located in Berks County, Pennsylvania, with a well-known and highly accomplished musical program. The choir recently produced a groundbreaking musical documentary called "This Is My Black," which won the Best Musical Documentary at the Out of Africa Film Festival and has been nominated for a 2023 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Breakthrough Creative Motion Picture. The Pine Forge Academy Choir will perform 6 pieces for us today, each of which will be introduced by Mr. Roseborough. Stay tuned.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jarrett Roseborough, the director for the Pine Forge Academy Choir. Thank you so much for having us today. Let's jump right in. Our first selection, Msifuni Mungu, is a lively piece written in the Swahili dialect that celebrates the greatness of a god/king. We want to start this virtual concert with this piece for a few reasons. One, the Negro spiritual and what we now know as Black music in general has its origins in Africa. The rhythms, cadences, compositional structures, harmonies, and styles of Black music, from the spirituals all the way to today's music, have roots in the rich musical traditions of the African continent. And so we want to honor the source of the spirituals and the source of Black musical heritage. Number 2, the song speaks of a king, which harkens back to African royalty. Now, there's this prevailing notion that enslaved Africans came from uncivilized or underdeveloped countries, but nothing could be further from the truth. There were well-organized kingdoms, nations, and empires in Africa with whom the Europeans bartered for enslaved persons. If you want to learn more about that, Burr Forman's 2021 Black History Month program covered the history of West African empires that were centers of international education, manufacturing, and commerce from medieval times up through the advent of the transatlantic slave trade. So we begin with the Song of a King as a reminder that the enslaved had a history that predated slavery, that the Black experience was not always one of servitude and degradation, but has encompassed every facet of the human experience, including luxury, wealth, royalty, and global influence. Number 3, we sing this piece in the Swahili language. Swahili actually originates in East Africa, rather than West Africa, where most of the enslaved were taken to the Americas. However, starting at least 2,000 years ago and up to the present day, Swahili is an international language spoken all over Africa and elsewhere. Today, it has over 200 million speakers globally. It is the official language of the African Union, and Swahili words and phrases have been integral to the African resistant movements against colonization. Finally, Swahili is the chosen language for the American-created Kwanzaa celebration, which is meant to root Black Americans in African values and cultural traditions. So in singing Swahili, we are referencing a Pan-African consciousness that is the unity of Black people across nationalities and the collective desire for liberation. If you can put yourself in the shoes of the enslaved, arriving in an unfamiliar land, forced to live among people who do not speak your language, placed in the same degraded position as a result of your shared skin color and continental origin, it would only be natural to seek out ways to connect with one another, to build community, and where possible, forge a resistance. Swahili represents all of those elements of the enslaved experience. With that understanding, the Pine Forge Academy Choir now shares its rendition of Msifuni Mungu. Our next piece is John Saw the Number. This is an upbeat Negro spiritual with the text taken from Revelation 7, where the Apostle John sees the number of saints that are saved in the kingdom of heaven. At the time John writes Revelation, the Roman Empire has exiled him to the island of Patmos. According to the Christian tradition, it is from this land of exile that John has a number of visions regarding the judgment and the end of the world. In Revelation chapter 7, John sees a great multitude which no man could number of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, who stood before the throne of God in heaven. This idea of a multinational multitude being saved and placed in the kingdom of God originates with the ancient Jewish prophets who foretold of Jews being exiled into the four corners of the world and then eventually gathered together back into the promised land to live in a righteous kingdom. Christianity adopted the general idea of believers being all over the world and eventually gathered into the kingdom of heaven. While we cannot say with any certainty what inspired an enslaved person to compose John Saw the Number, one imagines that the notion of exile would resonate with someone taken from their homeland. Moreover, a multinational multitude being placed together was not imaginary, but was a part of the enslaved experience, because slaveholders often deliberately mixed ethnic groups to minimize the chances of collaboration and rebellion. But in this song, the enslaved author envisions a time when the multinational multitude would no longer suffer, but instead be liberated and delivered into heaven, free to worship and be with their God. This piece is a testament to the brutality of slavery, that death would be viewed as a sweet relief, but it is also a testament to the psychological resilience of enslaved people in that they took hope in the visions of John despite their circumstances. If John couldn't number the number, then it was possible that they could make it into the hereafter and escape their dreadful conditions.
John saw the number. John saw the number. John saw the number. The number, the number, the number. Coming up on high. Hallelujah, John saw the number. He saw the holy number. John saw, he saw the number. John saw the number that no man could number.
This next selection, I've Been Buked, is a slower paced spiritual that sings about the hardships of the world. This gives an in-depth look into the hardships of life. Very repetitive in nature, it drives home the idea of the repetitive nature of trials in life. Unlike most Negro spirituals, it doesn't end with a happy ending, speaking about a promised land. It ends with the notion of not giving up and holding on to faith. On August 28, 1963, just before Martin Luther King Jr. took the podium at the March on Washington to deliver his famous I Have a Dream speech, gospel singer Mahalia Jackson did a soul-stirring rendition of this spiritual to rousing applause. At the time, the song would have been at least 100 years old, but still resonating with truth and power. We hope that our rendition resonates with the audience as well.
I've been buked, and I've been scorned. Yes, I've been buked, and I've been scorned. Children, I've been buked, and I've been scorned. Talked about, shows you born.
I've been buked and I've been scorned. I've been mute and I've been scorned. Shows you born.
I've been mute and I've been scorned. Yes, I've been mute and I've been scorned. And I've been scorned. I've been talked about, shows you born.
There is trouble all over this world. There is trouble all over this world. Children, there is trouble all over this world. There is trouble all over this world.
Elijah Rock is an up-tempo spiritual about the life of Old Testament prophet Elijah. Besides being a musically complex piece, it is considered to be a subversive message against slavery. The words of this song include several seemingly disconnected phrases and sentences such as, "Come on, sister, help me to pray. Tell me, my Lord, then pass this way. Elijah Rock coming up. He's a conjurer. He's a liar. And if I could, I surely would stand on the rock where Moses stood." Now, these lyrics have been interpreted to mean different things. Elijah Rock coming up seems to refer to the prophet Elijah being taken up in a chariot, a hidden message of the enslaved hoping to escape up north. It is the same message we hear in the better-known spiritual Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Standing on the rock where Moses stood refers the epic scene in the Bible where Moses parts the Red Sea and saves the Israelites from Pharaoh's army. It speaks to a great deliverance for all of the enslaved. References to a snake in the grass or a liar and conjure may be aimed at the slave masters or overseers. Using language often associated with Satan himself allows the slave to openly rebuke his enslavers without consequences. "Come on, sister, help me to pray. Tell me, my Lord, then pass this way. Ask whether deliverance is near," possibly referring to a conductor on the Underground Railroad. The song itself, with its lively syncopation and layered rhythms, sounds like a train. This too could be a reference to the Underground Railroad. Some even interpret the very high notes at the end of the song as mimicking the screech of a train coming to a stop. Hence, the deliverance from slavery has finally come. Another related interpretation that the song is about the prophet Elijah and the importance of his message and mission is this. Elijah stood against idol worship in his day. That is, the widespread worship of what he viewed to be a false god. It is possible that the slave people viewed their master's worship as false or idolatrous, considering all of the violence and the other hardship visited on the enslaved. Also, Elijah was called to preach a message of repentance and truth, despite his fears and the very real possibility of him being killed. Now, on its surface, the spiritual may be encouraging Elijah to preach the message that God has called him to preach. Beneath the surface, however, the double meaning could be encouraging people to speak up against slavery itself. Either way, the spiritual holds a subversive message of freedom and speaks to the creative genius and the indomitable humanity of enslaved people.
Oh, Elijah. Elijah Rock, shout, shout, I'm coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock is a coming up, Lord. Oh, Elijah Rock, shout, shout, I'm coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock is a coming up, Lord. Oh, Elijah Rock, shout, shout, I'm coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock is a coming up, Lord. Oh, Elijah Rock, shout, shout, I'm coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock is a coming up, Lord.
Satan's a conjurer and a liar
He's a
too.
liar.
Now, if you're not careful, he will conjure you. If you don't believe that I've been redeemed, why don't you follow me down to that Jordan stream?
Elijah Rock, shout, shout, I'm coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, he is a coming up, Lord. Oh, Elijah Rock, shout, shout, I'm coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock, he is a coming up, Lord. Oh, Elijah Rock, shout, I'm coming up, shout, Elijah Rock, he is a coming up, Lord. Oh, Elijah Rock, shout, I'm coming up, shout, Elijah Rock, he is a coming up, Lord. Oh,
Rock Elijah, you better follow me to Rock Elijah. I know you hear me talking, no Rock Elijah. The Lord is your praise and yes, you're gonna go through it.
Elijah Rock, shout, shout, I'm coming up, Lord. Elijah Rock rock. Shout, shout, I'm coming up, Lord. Elijah rock is a coming up, Lord. Elijah rock, shout, shout, I'm coming up. Elijah rock is a coming up, Lord. Elijah rock, shout, shout, I'm coming up. Elijah rock is a coming up, Lord.
If I could, I surely would stand on the rock where Moses stood. If I could, I surely would
Stand on the rock.
where Moses stood.
Elijah rock.
Come on, sister, help me to tell me why Lord has this
Hallelujah, Jesus, hallelujah, Jesus, hallelujah, Jesus, hallelujah, Lord.
coming up, Lordy, coming up, Lordy, coming up, Lordy.
Elijah rock. You got to get up and rock, rock, Elijah. You got to get up and rock, rock, Elijah. You got to get up and rock, rock, Elijah. Gotta get up and rock, Elijah, rock, rock, you to the God, yes. Gotta get up and rock, Elijah, rock, rock, Elijah. Gotta get up and rock, Elijah, rock, rock, preach to the Lord, yes. Gotta get up and rock, Elijah, rock, Elijah.
Get up, Elijah, you hear me talking. I need the word and I've been looking for you. Get up, Elijah, you hear me talking. I need the word and I've been looking for you. Rock, 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 Elijah, you better rock. I need the word and I've been looking for you. Rock, 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 Elijah, you better rock. I need the word and I've been looking for you. Rock, 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 Elijah, you better rock.
This next selection, A Poor Wayfaring Stranger, is a slower and more somber piece that chronicles the journey and the life of a slave on earth and the desire to make it from this life to the afterlife. This piece and its staging give a mild glimpse into the life of slaves, runaways, and the peril that is their everyday existence. Now, there's so much I could say about this piece, but the lyrics and the performance speaks well enough for themselves. Well, this next spiritual is based on answering the questions posed in the Old Testament book of Jeremiah, specifically Jeremiah 8 and verse 22, that asks, "Is there no balm in Gilead?" The purpose of this spiritual speaks to the idea that no matter what happens in life, there is hope that good will prevail. And no matter what the hurt, all wounds will eventually be healed.